This week in Pure Reinvention.
Mike and Misty, hello. This is Will, and I'm an obvious plant to stimulate conversation within the Pure Reinvention community. I have found myself from time to time getting worn out responding and reacting to disruptions in my business and professional career. Are there tools within the Pure Reinvention process to help manage the inevitable disruptions?
Episode 67, Purposeful Disruption.
Engage, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious people.
Welcome to this episode of Pure Reinvention, where we create space for the unexpected by inspiring a reinvention lifestyle. Got to thank Will for sending in that question because, Misty, we're going to move into a new area of answering some of our podcast listeners' questions.
We are, and I think this is a great way to hear from you and really have you bring us real-life experiences. We want to make sure we're hitting the mark and talking about things that are relevant to you, and the best way for us to do that is hear what's meaningful. So connect with us, reach out, and let us hear what's going on in your head and what you're dealing with day to day.
And that feedback will be so helpful because we'll be able to go into our archives, pull out some of our really meaningful, shareable quotes that our podcast guests have given us, and we'll have a conversation about that. So we're using not only our own experiences, but the experiences of our guests will be able to answer your question. This episode is sponsored by Pure Reinvention Starters. If you want to learn how to set yourself apart from other future leaders, this is the place to be. For more information, www.purereinvention.com.
So to answer Will's question, let's first look to April Boyle from Detroit's Build Institute.
But that's what a disruptor, they see things aren't working, and they want to try to solve the problem.
And I think the first thing that April has identified for us is we have to recognize what kind of a pattern we are looking for to recognize whether the pattern that we have is the correct one or not. So the first thing that a leader has to do in recognizing what pattern is happening is this what I want? Because there's no sense in disrupting significantly a pattern that for the most part is already doing the right things. Now, let's say, for example, the pattern that April has identified is not the pattern you want. And we have to remember that pattern happens because we know what we want. We're able to decipher then what is happening and do comparative analysis of what is not happening. So this is what we call trend analysis. What are the current trends versus what are the trends that we want to have? And once we can compare those two things, then we can start to talk about the purposeful disruption necessary to move from our current trend to our new trend.
So whatever your business card title may say, Vice President of Finance or Project Manager or whatever, all of us need an additional title, an unwritten one, that of disruptor or innovator or business artist or entrepreneur.
Author and keynote speaker Josh Linkner, who also created Fuel Leadership, and that's a really popular concept, a conference, speaking, live talk thing that's getting a lot of traction. But what's great about his little blurb there is that it doesn't have to be a business card title to make you own the idea of disrupting things.
Well, Misty, what's wrong with adding to our business title that we are going to be a little bit of a disruptor? And again, not a disruptor in a negative way, but a disruptor in a very positive way. I heard it said just recently, and I love this phrase, that what I want my employees to be doing is be continuously reinventing. So if we were to think about adding as a title to our role, no matter what our role is, that a certain percentage of our work, we need to be constantly more entrepreneurial in our thought process, to constantly think about who our audience is, who our customers are, what are they doing with whatever we're producing, and how can I make it better? How can I add more value to it? How can I change it in a way that others will say, wow, that's really cool what you have done, so that the disruption or the change that you've put in place is something that elevates everyone's game.
That's true. I've seen people do it on LinkedIn a time or two, and they'll change their title to something very creative. But you're right. Why not print that somewhere where you can really be held accountable to it? And it's not just something to turn heads or get more LinkedIn followers. It's to have a reminder every day of what you're there to do.
Misty, here's the key. Most people won't do that. So if you're one of those few people who are willing to put that on your title and to accept that responsibility, you become one of the peer leaders in your group. You're the one other people look to for the new ways that that you are doing business, that they begin to follow. You begin to separate out the difference between those who are leaders and those that are followers.
And that in itself is a disruption right there. Just that little title change.
Absolutely, because you've changed up the pattern. Remember, what leaders look for are patterns. And so if you start to change the current pattern you are in by doing something different, which adds value, which adds to the credibility of your work, that adds to the deliverables that are new and different, it begins to stimulate within your own work environment other people. And so now, instead of you becoming a disruptor, you are actually becoming a catalyst for other people to feed off of you and to create new energies that did not exist before.
So I think that it's important for us in our individual careers, as well as our goal to fulfill our calling and make the biggest possible impact in our companies and our communities, to be driving forces of innovation, to wake up every day and saying, how can I innovate? How can I change even the simplest things? It doesn't have to be only the breakthroughs. You don't have to go invent the next iPad to be innovative. You can change the way that coffee is made in your office.
Here's the thing I like about what Josh Linkner has reminded us of, and that is that change agents have value.
Yes, they do. And that it doesn't have to be some big earth-shattering approach. It can be in the small everyday things.
Absolutely. In fact, it may need to be in the small everyday things so that people can relate to those things.
Yeah.
When you show that you are a change agent and you're really willing and capable of innovating a new idea that's kind of known, but you're ready to put your new twist on it, what you're actually showing your work team and your supervisor that you have another gear. And that is so cool when you watch people, discover, and you watch supervisors who recognize that one of their employees has another gear, because you kind of get used to certain gears, and then all of a sudden somebody pops up with a new gear, and it takes you not by surprise, but it refreshes you that there's more to that person that they have to give.
Well, I think it also is a surprise. It might be a surprise to not only your peers or your boss, but to yourself. Like, I'm capable of this, and it is reinvigorating to give you another layer, another channel to explore.
And when you show that team that you work with that you have this additional gear, right, this additional ability to innovate to a new level, you become a stimulus to the rest of your work group. And that is so nice to find in a team of people, that one person that ends up being the catalyst, that ends up being the stimulus. And what happens then, and Josh called it the biggest possible impact, I want to rephrase that into the best possible impact.
Truly. I think that the best part about being a disruptor of the simple things is that it bursts creativity into the room. And like Josh used the example of just innovating the way you make coffee. It's all of those little things that make people think, well, how else could we approach something differently? How else could we approach our day-to-day in a new, refreshed way?
I think what Josh reminds us of is if we can keep that innovation simple, it can have the best possible impact.
Okay, so to wrap this up, let's talk about 3 major takeaways we have. The first one is look for the trends.
That's absolutely right, Misty. We have to recognize what current trends are going on to be able to have some sort of a comparison to the kind of trends that we want to have for the future. So you're absolutely right on the first trend.
And part 2 is disruption is a state of mind.
So when you think about a state of mind, think about that disruption is really your opportunity to solve a problem.
And lastly, keep it simple.
We can never emphasize enough how overly complicated people make this. Work really hard at keeping it simple and understandable.
We hope you enjoyed this Pure Reinvention short. It's something new we're trying, and it really will be successful if we hear from you. So if you have some questions that came up through what we talked about today or something you've heard from us in the past, or if you'd like to have a question talked about with our next topic, barriers to making space, email us at hello@purereinvention.com, or you can even call us and leave your question on our answering machine at 989 989-249-3885. So that number again, 989-249-3885. Send us your questions. We can't wait to hear from you.
A hotline set up specifically for you. If you're ready for a change, make it a change that lasts. Make it Pure Reinvention.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new podcasts are up by following us on Twitter at Pure Reinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.